Good afternoon, Terry. Thanks for joining us today. Really keen to hear about yourself and your business. So for start off by telling me about you and what sort of business you run.
Well, great to be with you, Milton. Thanks very much for your generous invitation to spend a little bit of time together to talk about me. Heaven help me, or heaven help you, probably, more importantly. Yeah, look, I've been in business a long time. In fact, coming up, I think technically to nearly on 40 years. So I'm not sure we've got that much time up our sleeve to go through all of the versions and all of the chapters there. But I guess if we break it up into bulk, into big lots, originally started out in the financial services industry. And still am involved there as a chairman of quite a large financial services company called Findex here in Australia and New Zealand. It's a large business that employs around 2,500 people and about 100 odd offices, etc., etc. But I'm not involved in that business on a day-to-day basis. I hold the chairman's role and a co-founder's role. But I actually spend most of my time, Milton, up the other end of the ship, in what we call startup land. And this is essentially our Paule family office, where we look to invest and mentor and commercialize and then corporatize people with good ideas, the proverbial garage. And we go on a journey with founders. Some of the projects and businesses that we've developed over the last 20 odd years have also been ideas that we've developed ourselves and commercialized and exited. So that probably breaks up my career, if you want to call it that, into two parts, sort of a big end of town part, and then the startup land or the founder journey.
What got you into the business, Terry?
Well, I guess that's what we all do. We've got to go out and earn a living. It's nothing unique to me. I guess you go to school and you get an education, and I was lucky enough to graduate out of Monash back in the early 80s, and then set about wondering what I wanted to do when I grew up, and found my way into the, as I mentioned, financial services industry, and started to build out of the back of that and try to do the best that I can, and here we are, nearly 40 years later.
What would be your ideal client for these startups?
Well, there's no real one size fits all. I guess startup land is what it lacks in systems and processes and procedures and infrastructure and all the things you get at the big end of town. It makes up for in the ability to throw up weird and wonderful ideas, and often attaching to them are weird and wonderful people, and managing relationships and being able to, we call it riding the bike and building it at the same time. And Milton, there are a lot of bike builders, as we call them, out in the world, and there are certainly a lot of bike riders in the world. It's very, very few people that can build a bike and ride it at the same time, and it's a particular skill that I think we've learnt over a long period of time. And we try to take that skill that we have and attach it to other people and other people's ideas and their dreams and their journey, and partner up with them effectively to make it, make what they want to do a reality as a business partner.
Fantastic. What's the biggest challenge you're facing in business right now?
Well, look, I've been around, as we're saying, for such a long time. There's probably nothing new in the sense that, embracing change, and there's always something, there it was a couple of years ago, we had COVID. No one was expecting that one. I certainly wasn't. We've managed our way through that, and I think we're still measuring the fallout from that. And, the next big thing in town at the moment is AI, and the disruption, the transformative disruption, as we call it, that can happen there. I've been intrigued by ChatGPT and actually been training it over the last little while, the last few months. I sort of became aware of it through some relationships I had out of Europe that had been dealing with it for the last year or so. But all the other day-to-day stuff, interest rates, hiring and firing, running a business, all of the things that get in our way to make our life difficult on occasions are still there and will always be there. And on the positive side, I consider myself to be a positive person with can be a bit grumpy on occasion, but generally I get up in the morning with an attitude that says that we will make progress and we will be the best version of ourselves and do good in the world. And that's a very important part of what gets me up out of bed, is the same, and it hasn't probably changed throughout my working life. So there's nothing really unique. It is a moment in time.
Along that same line, Terry, what's the biggest learning you've had since being in business? One of the biggest learnings.
Well, I guess that, there's no one big, otherwise it would be too big. It's a composition of things, and the way the way I've tended to deal with them and learn from them is, and it's a little bit philosophical, I guess. We have those moments, but being able to find a connection and a balance between what I call mind, body, and soul. Those three elements are really the ingredients to success in life, both in personal and in business life. And you hear about mind, body, and spirit, or mind, body, and soul, and it probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people that are probably even listening to this podcast. But in essence, in their true form, they are important ingredients. Mind, but if we define them, mind being around our intelligence and our attitude and the things that we learn and experience. Body around our capabilities, some are God-given, so to speak, others we learn and we try to teach ourselves, but the ability to execute on an idea, these are all body. And I guess the missing ingredient, often the third and very, very important part, is soul or spirit. And really in an everyday way, around our want of something more than anything else, our ability to lean in, to be determined, to be persistent, to want something. And that's a very, very important ingredient. If you have all three, I think you end up with extreme success.
Yeah.
2 out of 3 gets you a long, long way. 1 is not enough. If you're gifted in just one of those, you want something, but you can't execute, or you're not smart about the way of going about it, won't get you there. If you've got God-given talent, but you don't have application or a good mindset around it, that won't get you there, and so on and so on. So having all 3 is pretty rare, but that's what we aspire to when we get out of bed in the morning.
Great, fantastic. Do you have any favourite quotes or sayings that you've learned along the way, or you like to use, or use?
Heaven help us. I've probably got a box full of them, Milton. But look, well, there's lots of books too. There's some, I'm sure people listening to this have probably read most of them. They're all the ones that go back many years that probably sound a little bit dated at the moment. I guess my favourite movie is It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know if you've ever seen that. With it's more something that gets screened around Christmas time, but yes, with Jimmy Stewart in it. And I've watched that, I think, every Christmas day or Eve for the last probably 30 years. It's a bit of a ritual in our family. I've probably slept through it a few times as well, and watch but it reminds us that we're not alone on this planet, and the things that we do impact other people. And if we get up in the morning and with a giving mentality and not expecting to receive, somehow we always get more out of life than what we give. There are givers and takers. I consider myself to be a giver without necessarily expecting anything in return. And I've been very lucky to have a fruitful life. And, the world's been generous in most ways, but obviously I've had my difficulties like anyone else. In terms of books, business books, I guess that's probably a lot of what we're talking about today. Books like Good to Great and Built to Last, yeah, they're pretty powerful books. Even books like the E-myth, which goes back 20 or 30 years ago, and was quite an interesting book in its time, but still has relevance. Around building systems and the system being the solution, not necessarily people and so on. But I'm not going to bore everyone and recount my library of books, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight as to the sorts of things that have impacted my journey.
Good. What would you say to someone thinking of going into business now?
Well, it's probably no different to anyone going into business at any point in time. I guess we've sort of touched on some of the mentality, some of the the mind, body, and soul moments, some of the things that are a hallmark, I believe, to successful people. And success isn't always measured necessarily in money. Success can be measured in different ways. I would say to them that they should do it if they feel that that they're going into it for the right reasons. Often I find when I do a bit of mentoring, I like to mentor young people, and I always encourage them to chase their dream, but to chase it for the right reasons. And often people go into business so that they're not working for someone else. They see the boss making all the money, and they feel as though they're putting in all of the effort, and the rewards aren't the same. And they go from working 50 hours a week to working 100 hours a week for probably half the money and all the stress. So it's not as easy as what people think until you're actually driving the ship and making all of those decisions, and the way that it impacts your life, your health, your family, and all of the other stakeholders. So I would just counsel them to make sure they know what it is that they're doing and doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, great advice. What's the best advice you would give to your 18-year-old self?
Well, that's a very good question. An 18-year-old me.
Yeah.
I would, there's still an 18-year-old guy inside this grumpy old bloke that you're looking at here. So
absolutely.
he hasn't changed. I've actually had this, not quite the same conversation. I've got a 27-year-old son, and I can remember not too long ago, we were just chatting about this. And I said to him, if I could go back to being your age, which is a little bit older than 18, but, sort of similar in age, I would do it. I would do it again. I would actually hand back everything that I have today to have one more go at it, as through the eyes of a young man again, but with one proviso. And he said to me, well, what's the proviso, Dad? I said, I'd do it on the basis that I could take all the knowledge that I have, all the education, experience, training, everything that I've experienced, and I'd start back at zero today easily, but knowing what I know. And I'm not sure he truly understood, Milton, what I was saying there, but you and I are probably similar in age, and I guess you're probably understanding a little bit better. But that competitive advantage, to have that experience and having gone through it and sort of know what, the old what is it, Kenny Rogers song, when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, and when to run. That's a pretty powerful thing to have in life.
Yeah, because we've often learned from making mistakes too. That's how we learn, and pushing boundaries. And if you haven't made those mistakes, but to have that experience and learn from it and start again, how powerful would that be?
Yeah, absolutely, Milton. And I often say when I do my mentoring, I often say to people that when things are going well, we tend to have a philosophy here in the office that we probably get criticised for not celebrating enough, and that's probably a lot of me. I'm not a huge celebrator. Just as a person, I tend to just get on with it. I have my moment and then get on with it. But I often say when things are going well, that we should push harder, and good times really give you confidence, and they give you momentum. They're the two things you get out of good times. You only grow in bad times. You don't grow in good times. You actually only grow as a person when things are not going in your favor. That's where you actually grow as a person. and learn from the hard times. So good times are for momentum and confidence, and bad times is when you grow.
Yeah, great advice. Really good. What does the future look like for you now, and what sort of challenge do you may expect in the future?
Well, funny. You know, as you go through your life and you achieve and you tick a few boxes, and you know, certainly in the business world, we've done a few things, and that we're quite proud of as a family and as a business and as a person. But right at the moment, we're at a critical point in one of our businesses known as botanical water. It's actually an Australian invention that we invested in 4 or 5 years ago, where we harvest the water that naturally occurs in plants. We take a new source of water, you know, water that lives in tomatoes, water that lives in carrots, etc., etc. And we've taken that over the last 4 years from what I would call a novel invention on a farm, and really a bottled water business, and the water coming from a new source from plants, to what could be a very huge impact in the world, to make a huge social and environmental impact. Our goal with that business is, as we went along the journey, that we realized there's something like 3 trillion litres of this water that gets thrown away around the world in a world where water scarcity and contamination is a big thing. And if we particularly focus on India, which has 18% of the world's population and has only 4% of the world's water, where water scarcity and contamination is a big issue, where something like 1.5 million people a year die from water and sanitation related diseases. We're at a point now where we're rolling out our technology into India later this year in a place called Pune, which will allow us to impact a lot of the world's most vulnerable people. So we have a mission in our office here to positively impact 100 million of the world's most vulnerable people by gifting this water into those communities between now and 2025, which is not a long way away. It's only in the next couple of years. So that's really where I'm living my life, right in that moment where I get up probably every day, 365 days in the year, with the goal to achieve that impact, to impact those vulnerable people over the next couple of years. That's a big answer to that question, probably one you weren't necessarily expecting. But if anyone's interested, you know, out the back of the podcast, if they Google wegrowwater.com, they'll be able to see some of the work that we're doing, some of the projects we're doing in California, in India and in Mexico, and even here in Australia. We'll be impacting the Great Barrier Reef later this year as well with some of our botanical water. It's a big story. Fantastic.
Well, thanks, Terry. That's been really good to hear your history and what you've achieved over time, and your philosophy too, which I think is really well grounded, of course. Is there any offer you'd like to make for the Spotlight listeners in the future?
No, look, it's always difficult, actually, as much as a lot of that I think felt very natural. Probably talking about yourself, I'm always interested in other people, intimately interested in other people's journeys, because I feel as though hopefully you can add value. Often people in business can get a bit isolated, particularly in small business, and you know, just to offer the encouragement that to keep going. My brother always says, my older brother always says, it's always darkest just before the dawn, and that's a fabulous saying, and one that I'd love to pass on to some of your listeners.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. It's been really good talking to you today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No worries, Milton. It's been great to meet you, and thanks very much for your invitation again.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.